YouTube, I'm Symue, your friendly owl friend here with a massive update. We just got round 2 of the fall Swiss tournament in which I played against Eric L. Yes, a different Eric from round 1. We have played many times before and he's a strong 1800 player, but we have about an equal record. So going into this game, I felt like it was a 50-50, especially because I had the white pieces this time. Let's see how it went. In the game, I decided to open with 1b3. I also considered e4, but I was pretty sure he played the Sicilian, and I didn't want to play against the Sicilian. And I also knew he plays the Dutch, specifically the Leningrad Dutch, which involves playing the pieces like this and then castling quick and eventually playing for e6 and e5. Now, I wouldn't be playing these moves, I'm just simply showing what their plan is. So I figured that playing b3, playing bishop b2 could potentially stop them from getting the setup that they want out of the Dutch. However, I should have recognized that my opponent would know the best response to this, which is actually play d6, which threatens to play e5, take over the center, which I don't want to have happen. So I have to play d4, which unfortunately allows him to get the setup he wants. And so I didn't really achieve what I wanted out of b3, but I'm not unhappy with my position. From here, this was my first real big think of the game, and the main move I was considering is if I wanted to play d5 here, or if I wanted to develop my knight to some square. I eventually ruled out this move because, like, I didn't feel like this was the best approach from me. And the fact that if I just play h3, e5 isn't threatened, I just win a pawn. So why should I be worrying about a move that doesn't exist right now? So I went with knight b d2 because I figured it was the best spot for my knight, as the c3 square would block my bishop and allow them to potentially play e5. Knight a3 didn't seem great because I can't go to this square, and going back to c2 didn't seem worth the 2 tempo to do it, so simply went with this. And after he played rook e8, which is threatening to play e5 potentially, I decided that I should probably play d5 because I'd rather play this position here than play a position where they play e5. Because after I capture here, they get their ideal pawn structure that they're looking for. And while objectively this might be better for me, I didn't want to give them the structure that they're looking for. So I went with d5 here. And you might be looking at this, and if you're a knowledgeable player, you might be asking, isn't this a free pawn? And the answer is yes, but I have enough development that it shouldn't be too much of an issue. First off, I need a trade here. And, I can develop the rook here. Maybe I develop the bishop here. Black probably could defend here, but it's not going to be fun to defend. And one of the things about the Leningrad Dutch that I know is that d5 is a very typical move, and that the principal move typically is to play e5 right away without thinking. So I figured that if I played this gambit move, that he's probably just going to play e5 without thinking because that's what you're supposed to play. And that is exactly what he did. And so I took, and we reached this position where it's similar to that position I talked about earlier, but they've committed a rook move. And I felt like that was slightly better for me than pushing d5 right away and taking and having the bishop develop because the rook may want to be somewhere else. My knight probably doesn't want to be anywhere else than here, so forcing them to put a rook on a square that might not be optimal seem beneficial. These are just the small things that come to mind when you're playing these solid structures and trying to get the slightest edge and retain it. From here, queen c2, defending the bishop, guarding this square some more so they can't just dive in with the knight. Here, they went with knight a6 with the idea of going here. If they go here, it just attacks my queen, but it does also kind of stop me from playing bishop d3 because at the very least they can win the bishop pair, which shouldn't be good for me. At the very least, it should be equal, if not preferred, for black. So I went with a3 because in my head I potentially want to put my bishop here. I also realized that if he plays a slow move, I could play b4 and take away the square from the knight, which was the only other plan I could see that I was trying to do, was to put this knight all the way to e4 from the c5 square. So I figured I play e5, or a5, not a5, a3, so that I'm threatening b4 so that he needs to play knight c5 here. And then I'm just going to chase him into the square because I don't think I can really prevent the idea, and gaining some queenside space felt nice. From here, I don't want to trade with him because he can just take back with the pawn. I didn't particularly like this position so much. Computer says it's fine. In fact, it's actually worse than just taking with the knight, but I think from a practical standpoint, allowing them to take with the pawn doesn't feel great. So I just moved my rook into the center of the board opposite of the queen. It also defends my queen if that ever matters. It could be a lot of potential issues with an undefended queen. And having this rook across could also mean that there's some tactics that can arise later on in the game. Here, my opponent took the knight. I could take back with my knight or the queen. I disregarded the queen instantly because knight comes out to e4, attacking my queen. And after I move my queen back, we reach the exact same position as before, where it's black to move, but this knight and this knight don't exist. So that's definitely not good for me. But I do get to trade off the dark square bishop, which is something he may not want to have happen because his king isn't the safest anymore, or as cozy as we say in the biz. So after I took back with the knight, mainly because it just stops him from going there, and I felt like maybe it was better to just stop him from doing that. He went with rook a, d8, and from here I went with bishop f3, getting the bishop on the long diagonal, because I felt if there's the only way I could potentially win, and continue on with this game is to do a minority attack on their pawn majority here. So I'll attack with my 3 pawns against their 4 pawns in the attempt to try to weaken their pawns enough to where I can win one of them. So from here, my opponent went with d5, striking at the center, and from a practical standpoint, equalizing the position. Here, I wasn't super happy because I can't capture because it's not particularly great. And after thinking for a while, I decided just h3. It stops any back rank issues, gives air for my king. And I didn't really mind if they take me because I'll just take back with the knight, and I felt like this should be fine for me. Instead, he actually went with a really fascinating move, which was f4, trying to attack down my structure. And here I played like the one move I regret most in this game. It's not inaccurate, but honestly, it has a flawed idea behind it. And even though I saw this, I just didn't consider it being as good for black as it actually is. And I played bishop d4 because I liked putting my bishop in the center. I liked that I was somewhat putting pressure here on this pawn. But objectively, I'm not doing anything to this pawn. And if they take here, and I take back this way, they could just push this pawn down the center, which I saw. And I was like, no, that's fine. I just move my bishop over to here. What's the big issue here? You know? Oh, and if they kick my bishop away, I can just get my bishop over here and all is good. And I didn't consider, like, after this move, they can actually just keep pushing this pawn down. And now my queen has to, like, awkwardly move out of the way. And this pawn is either weak or it's promoting. And that's not really a pawn you want to deal with in chess at all. And right now, that pawn is strong. It's not weak. And I'm not sure if I can ever prove that it is weak. So I am annoyed that I allowed myself this idea for black. But luckily for me, I had a huge time advantage, and I kind of got the vibe from him at this point with it that he wanted to clarify things, he wanted to trade pawns, open up the position. And so I didn't feel like he was going to play d4. So he plays this capture, and I take back with the bishop. And he does actually capture. He doesn't do anything. He actually just moves his bishop here, which is fine. Black's slightly better here now, but it's fine. I just go queen b3, the best move. And here, d4 is possible, but now it's less good because the bishop's on a less good square. The bishop attacking this pawn is actually an important factor in the position because this pawn in some very distant positions can be hanging if I'm not careful, and that he could win this pawn. And these lines, this pawn is never hanging because the bishop's no longer attacking it. And while this bishop seems better placed on f5, it doesn't attack anything. So I would have been fine if he played this, but luckily for me, he actually took here. At this point, I knew it was back to being better, or at least preferred. And from a practical standpoint, I think I'm just flat out better. Because I have a simple plan of doing a minority attack against this structure. And I was already seeing here they can't really defend their queen side effectively. So I'm probably going to be up a pawn in an endgame. Now, is an endgame where I'm up a pawn where it's a 3 on 2, which is usually a draw with this many pieces on board, but it always feels nice that I will be up a pawn, most likely. So I'm the only one who could win this game at this point. And that's great, considering that I'm not feeling super great and just want to play solid. I have to play rook d f to d1 because there's this cheeky fork of the queen and rook, which luckily for me, this king is in check, so this move can't be played here, which I saw in advance, hence why I was flying going for this line. From here, they still played their bishop to d3, which I didn't really think it was all that important. I vaguely considered maybe transferring my queen over to the king side, but I was like, my attack's on the queen side. It's not going to be on the king side. My queen should probably stay over here. At this point, he plays pretty much the best move, but kind of like a giving up move because he's just allowing me to play a4 and b5 very easily. And here he plays yet another strange move. He moves his bishop back, which I don't agree with because my plan is to say he plays whatever move, is to play here. But if he has the bishop here, you could potentially take here. In this case, he can't because this pawn is pinned, so I win a piece. But like the bishop's pretty good here. Why move it back? So I just continue with my plan, and here he just places the rook on d3 to attack my queen. I instantly go to c4 for the most part because I'm like, I'm just going to keep attached to that rook because the only defender of that rook is the bishop. So potentially there's going to be some tactics with that. After the game, Eric actually pointed out that g4 was on his mind a lot here because g4 kicks the bishop away from the defense, but that he was not completely scared of g4 because he felt like he could sacrifice the rook here. And if he did, that then when I recapture, he would then have this queen check here, and then I have to block with the bishop. And from there, it's very sharp, very chaotic, and who knows if it's a win loss or even a draw. My king's pretty wide open, and anything can happen. At this point, he plays a takes b5, I play a takes b5, and this is where the game kind of ends climactically due to this mistake, this blunder. If you don't see it right away, I'll give you a couple seconds. You can pause. Okay. Bishop takes here. As I stated before, after the rook recaptures, which is what he did, I can just take it because if you take back, I take the queen. The queen's undefended, so I want a rook. I'm up a full rook for nothing. Like, flat, clean rook. Like, this is a very bad blunder here. And while this is the blunder that the computer says, it's honestly, this is where I would say the blunder is. The computer says this is instead a mistake. No, this is where the blunder was because he didn't see that I could just take the rook here. And when I did, he just face palmed. He realized he just lost the whole game because when it's on the board, it's so obvious you can't take my queen because it's there. So The game, he plays a couple last moves here. He decides to sack the rook here, which sort of scared me. And since I had 18 minutes on the clock, I decided just to make sure there wasn't any shenanigans, because if he's able to move this queen with check, he might be able to capture my king in a certain way that might be good for him. So, for example, if this move happens, this, and I have this pawn all the way, the queen can check here, and if I move my king, they can now capture my queen, and I'm losing here, I think. Or maybe I'm not. Who knows? But it's definitely not good. But obviously, it's like his idea behind this last little trick. But I realized it doesn't work. And after queen um, b6, I recognize my queen's under attack. I just move my queen over. And this is where he resigned after thinking for a minute, because there's nothing to play for here. It's just a loss. And an unfortunate end to the game. Unsatisfying end. But we did discuss the what if. And the what ifs were really fascinating. So in this position, what if he didn't play knight d5? What are the other moves? Well, one of them we considered, which we had a lot of fun analyzing, was this exchange sack, with the idea of queen here and trying to get some counterplay via this exchange stack. I can't remember exactly how we analyzed this, but after some just generic moves, like queen here, uh, captures, and then capture series. Like, I'm just up the exchange cleanly here. It's potentially holdable because converting up the exchange is honestly kind of difficult to do, but this is definitely not the end game you want to defend. My suggestion to him was a5, or not a5, h5. This is a pawn gambit, but black needs to realize here that they need to go for a draw, and this is a draw. I can't win this. And a5 is really critical to making this draw extremely easy to do, because this pawn structure here is makes it very hard for me not to trade off these pawns to get a pawn passed. And if I'm only left with one pawn with all these pieces here, he can just sacrifice a full piece for that one pawn, and I should probably have infinite material to checkmate their king, and the game ends in a draw. So even though I'm up a pawn here, there's no way to win. But it's not fun to go into these lines. And so he would rather try to go for like an exchange sacrifice and lose, or try to get some complications going. And honestly, I'm not even sure that I could even convert the position, even if I was fully up the exchange cleanly, because, like I said, I don't know how to convert that. And that's something I need to work on 100%. So we'll go to the tail of the tape now. And as you can see here, the graph is very flat. We both played very well. I played at a 96% accuracy with no inaccuracies, mistakes, blunders, with an average centi pawn loss of 10, which could be a little bit better, but it's more than good for my level. Eric, the computer says one mistake, one blunder. I already said this as before. I honestly say he made one blunder, which was rook takes. They're missing the whole tactic that I have, given up the full rook. And honestly, when he lost the full piece, there really wasn't much coming. There wasn't really any way to come back in this game. And we are 1.5 going into the third round of 4 for the fall Swiss. I do not think I'm leading the tournament, and I probably won't win the tournament, but as long as I can get a draw, I end with 50%. If I get a win, then I'm always above 50%, which is a great spot to be in any tournament. We'll have the round 3 game for you next week, Friday, for you. It should be an interesting one. I don't know who I'm going to be playing against, but it should be a fun game regardless. And if you watched this far, you're very cool. I like you. And you get your much deserved and well earned. Bye bye.